So, hey everybody, welcome to day two, week one of our 7 week, 7 app challenge. Yesterday, what I showed was an intro video where I showed what the final product looks like for this week, where you are building a CableSnap application where you take a picture of a cable or a device and it tells you what kind of cable it is and connects you to Amazon where you can go and buy the particular cable. Or if it's a picture of a device, it tells you what are all the different possibilities and connects you to Amazon. So today, what we're going to do is look at the back end for this particular mobile app or the iOS app. What happens in the back end is there's an API gateway that exposes an HTTP API directly to the iPhone application. That's how the client communicates with the server. And behind the API gateway, that's a Lambda function. And the Lambda function communicates with the AI service of AWS called Bedrock. Specifically within Bedrock, there are lots of models. And the model it communicates with is Claude 4 and Claude 3.7. All right. So let's look at the Lambda code and quickly see how it was structured. I'll just go through the most important parts. So one thing I do want to mention is the Lambda. I've started using the Lambda console itself for coding because it now has the Q developer, which is an LLM based coding assistant where I can just write comments. For example, I can just say create an S3 bucket, for example. Okay. And then what it does is it's intelligent enough to actually go ahead and suggest a particular code for it. Okay. So, for example, maybe if I said create an S3 bucket. So here you can see that S3 is equal to boto3.client. It just gives you the code, okay? So I've started using Q developer with Lambda on the console itself. So I just go to the console and type my code. So here I wrote this particular code by starting with the Bedrock runtime. These are all some helper functions because once the AI assistant or the foundation model comes up with an output, I really need to parse it out. Okay, so the first one is just making sure that it only has alphabets, letters, and strings, and I'm going to remove the trading white spaces. And then I'm going to parse the particular JSON, and then I go ahead and write the lambda hamlet function. So remember what goes in. I take a picture. So it's an image that goes to the foundation model that churns through and gets an output. Okay, so the image input is in base 64. Okay, so this is the most important thing that you probably want to remember is an image is converted to base 64. And I'm just having a system prompt by which the Lambda is going to communicate with the Bedrock service. So here I say you will see a full cable image or just a device. Identify the cable type or adapter. The other thing I also say is identify the adapter needed to connect to Mac or Windows. Okay, so because sometimes Windows might require an adapter, Mac may not, and things like that. Finally, this is the most important thing. I tell it to give me an output where I have cable type and an explanation. All right. And so this is what hopefully you remember from yesterday, where it said USB-C to USB-A and an explanation of why it was that. All right. And I have a couple more instructions. And then at the end of it, I'm going to send it to the Bedrock model. Okay. So if you are not very familiar with Bedrock, which is the AI service, let me quickly go and show you what it looks like. So this is Bedrock and it has a bunch of foundation models out of which LLMs or large language models are a subset of it. So the first thing you always want to do in Bedrock is make sure you give the model access. All right. So here you can see there's AI 21 Labs, there is Amazon, there is Anthropic. And so I'm going to be using the Claude set of models, which are Anthropic models. And specifically, if you're not very familiar with the models, go ahead here to the model catalog and look at your use case. In my particular case, the input is an image. So the model should be able to understand images. So I go to text vision, and these are all the different possible models. Okay, so not all models can understand images. And so what I do is, okay, I've set on Claude Opus 4. This is the latest and greatest model by Anthropic at this time, with a larger set of parameters, which means inference will take a long time. Sonnet is a smaller version of it, and the previous generation was 3.7 Sonnet. So what I am going to do in my code is to hit the best model, which is Opus 4. But if it fails, revert back to 3.7 and get me an output. For some reason, Opus 4 always keeps giving me some trouble. So that's why I wrote this backup. All right. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have access to the model. If you don't have access, go in here and go ahead and request it. Okay. So for example, if I want AI 21 lab model, you basically just say that, and usually the access is granted instantly. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Okay. So now that I have given access to the model, the next thing is what is the API call to Bedrock that I have to make, right? So that's the next thing I need to know, for which I go into the model catalog and go into, let's say, Claude Opus 4. This is where all your AI assistants like ChatGPT and all of them cannot give you the correct API structure, right? That's why you really need to go into the documentation to understand how the API structure is. So I go in here and go to the code examples, and specifically I go into the invoke model API, because that's what we are doing. We're invoking a model and the model is going to come up with an output. So I go into the invoke model, and you can see here that this is how the structure looks like. Specifically for Claude models, you need this type of syntax. So you need role user, and within that, the content and the text is going to be the prompt. Okay, in this case, this is the prompt, and I showed you the prompt in our use case. The last thing is the model ID. Okay, here is where you probably have a gotcha moment, and I'll tell you what that is. But as long as we understand this, the output is going to be a JSON that you get as an output. And so, which is exactly what I'm doing here. That is the Anthropic version, and I'm essentially taking the API call. Okay. And then I'm going to start my cable type and explanation as null values. Now, the model ID, please don't get confused. There are two model IDs. There's a model ID when you go to the model catalog or the model card, which is this. This is not what you need. What you need is you're going to do an inference with the particular model. So you're going to go in here to cross region inference. And then let's say you go into Claude Opus 4. The model ID is this one, the inference profile ID. Okay. So this is what you need. And this is what goes in here, which means Opus 4 is going to be hit and you're going to get an output. All right. And these are all just the parsing, because I need to make sure that I want the cable type specifically and I want the object specifically. Okay. And so because I need these two specifically, I'm going to keep them separately and then I'm going to pass the JSON. So what I'm going to say is, if it's not a model type, then if it's not going through Opus 4, then I'm going to revert back to 3.7. All right. So once I'm done with this, now I have the cable type. So all I have to do is pass through the Amazon link. So just go to amazon.com, pass through the link, and what I get is the final output, right? So ultimately, I'm going to get the cable type, I'm going to get the explanation, and I'm going to get the search, because here all I'm doing is I'm parsing the cable type, and here the safe term essentially means that I'm just going to take the cable type and just clean it up based on the first helper functions that I showed you. Okay. So again, these are all things, the helper functions and all totally use an AI assistant. Like I said, I use Claude Code, I use um, Chat GPT quite a bit, and then I use Q Developer as well. So all three of them put together, you can write all this cleaning code, but the essence of all of this on how you call Bedrock and get an output looks like this. So now I get this as my final JSON, which is what my client is going to parse. All right. So let me go ahead and deploy this. The next thing is I usually try and test this particular Lambda function in the console itself. So basically go and test here and then do cable class. And then you want to give a JSON here. And so let me show you an example for the actual cable that I'm going to put this up to. So here is a JSON, and you can see here that I have image 3080 that looks like this. And then what I'm going to do here is this particular cable I want to be classified. So I wrote a very small script, which again use an AI assistant to write it. But essentially you take the image and then get the base 64 string out of that. Okay. So here I have the base 64 string. It just looks like this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and have a certain kind of test criterion. So in this particular case, it looks like this. Okay, so it's going to be body with image base 64, and this is where my string goes in. So I'm going to take this particular string and just go ahead and paste it here. And with that, I press test. So now there's going to be a little bit of a warm startup, so it's going to take a little bit of time. In addition, you can see here there's a task timed out after 3 seconds. Okay, remember Lambda has a runtime of 15 minutes, but the default is 3 seconds, and so I want to change this to 3 minutes. So let me save here and go ahead and run this again. So this has just started executing, and you can see that it takes a little bit of time because this is the first call I'm making to Bedrock after quite a large number of times. So essentially, we are going to get the cable type, we are going to get the explanation, and we are going to get the Amazon link. Yeah. So today's session is probably the longest that is going to be in this series because we went through a few different things, and we just have to make sure that we understand everything the way we should. So normally it takes about 20 seconds, but for this particular case, it is taking maybe about 50 seconds, I guess, maybe even a minute. Shouldn't take that long, but probably because it has not been called for a long time. All right. So here you can see it's an AC with figure 8 connected. This is standard AC power cable. No adapter is needed as this is a power cable, which is exactly it was. Okay. And then finally it gives an Amazon link. And then once I go in here and put the Amazon link, boom, you can go ahead and buy this from Amazon. Okay. The one last thing is everything in AWS is all about IAM permissions. So you want Lambda to be able to access Bedrock with permissions. And so here's an execution role where I have this IAM permission set. Specifically, all I've said is that particular Lambda function can invoke Bedrock. So that's all I give permissions by the principle of least privilege. I don't give it anything more so that nobody else will be able to use my API to access Bedrock. Okay. So only my Lambda function is authorized to call Bedrock and nothing else can be done by the Lambda function. So hopefully that made sense today on how the CableSnap application works on the back end with Lambda. Tomorrow we'll just look at the API gateway and then we'll go ahead look at the front end and look at how we deploy it on the App Store. Thank you again. Day 2 of week 1 of the 7-week 7-app challenge. We are moving ahead. I'll see you tomorrow on day 3 of week 1. Have a great day, everyone.